The world spun as I stormed out of Chez Pierre, the fancy French restaurant where my soon-to-be ex-wife had just humiliated me in front of our closest friends. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the burning shame and anger coursing through my veins. I could still hear her mocking laughter ringing in my ears, see the pitying looks on our friends' faces, but I was done. Done with her games, her manipulation, her constant belittling. As I held a cab, I swore to myself, this ends now. But let me back up. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this mess in the first place. It all started 7 years ago, on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday. I was grabbing coffee at my unusual spot, a tiny hole-in-the-wall place that made the best espresso in town. As I waited for my order, I couldn't help but notice the woman ahead of me in line. She was stunning, long chestnut hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that could light up the room. When she turned to leave, she accidentally bumped into me, spilling her latte all over my crisp white shirt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing napkins and dabbing at my chest. "I'm such a klutz. Please let me pay for your dry cleaning." I laughed it off. "Don't worry about it. These things happen. Besides, I needed an excuse to go shopping anyway." She looked relieved and held out her hand. "I'm Melissa. At least let me buy you a coffee to make up for it." And just like that, I was smitten. We sat and talked for hours, discovering we had so much in common. She was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. By the time we parted ways, I had her number and a date set for Friday night. Our first date was magical. I took her to a little Italian restaurant I knew, tucked away in the quiet corner of the city. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine, and I found myself captivated by her stories of growing up in a small town. Her dreams of making it big in the city as a lawyer. When she reached across the table and took my hand, I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. "You know, David," she said, her green eyes twinkling the candlelight. "I have a feeling this is the start of something special." I couldn't have agreed more. Our whirlwind romance was the stuff of fairy tales. Melissa was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner, or so I thought. We moved in together after just 3 months, and I proposed 6 months after that. Our wedding was a lavish affair with all our friends and family in attendance. I remember standing at the altar, watching Melissa walk down the aisle, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. If only I'd known then what I know now. The changes were subtle at first. A snide comment here, a backhanded compliment there. I brushed it off as stress from her high-powered job as a corporate lawyer. But as time went on, the jabs became more frequent and more pointed. "Oh honey, you're wearing that shirt again. Don't you think it's time to update your wardrobe a bit?" she'd say with a saccharine smile. Or at dinner parties with friends. "You'll have to excuse David, he's not really up on current events. Too busy with his little hobby projects, aren't you, dear?" I tried to talk to her about it, but she always turned it around on me. "You're being too sensitive," she'd say. "Can't you take a joke? I'm just teasing you." But it wasn't just teasing. It was a systematic campaign to erode my self-esteem, to make me doubt myself at every turn. And like a frog in slowly boiling water, I didn't realize how bad things had gotten until it was almost too late. One night, about 2 years into our marriage, I overheard Melissa on the phone with her mother. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but her words stopped me cold. "I knew, Mum, I just thought I could change him. Make him more ambitious. But he's just so content with his mediocre job and his stupid hobbies. Sometimes I wonder why I even married him." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Was that really how she saw me? Mediocre? A project to be fixed? I wanted to confront her, to defend myself, but something held me back. Maybe, I thought, if I just tried harder, worked longer hours, gave up some of my stupid hobbies, she'd see me differently. So I did. I started staying late at the office, volunteering for every project that came my way. I stopped playing guitar, gave up my weekend hikes. I even started dressing differently, buying expensive suits that Melissa picked out for me. For a while it seemed to work. Melissa praised my new work ethic, showed me off at parties like a prized pet. But the more I changed for her, the more I lost myself. And still, it wasn't enough. The criticisms continued, became more biting. Nothing I did was ever good enough. If I got a promotion, she'd wonder why it wasn't a bigger one. If I cooked dinner, she'd complain about the seasoning. Even in the bedroom, she'd make little comments that left me feeling inadequate and ashamed. I started to withdraw, to doubt every decision I made. My friends noticed the change in me, but I brushed off their concerns. I didn't want to admit, even to myself, how unhappy I was. The breaking point came on our 5th anniversary. I had planned a romantic dinner at Chez Pierre, the restaurant where we had our first date. I invited our closest friends, couples we had known for years. I thought it would be a perfect night to reconnect, to remind Melissa of why we fell in love in the first place. How wrong I was. As we entered Chez Pierre, the maitre d' greeted us warmly. "Ah, Monsieur et Madame Thompson. Welcome back. Your table is ready." I felt a surge of pride as we were led to the best table in the house, right by the window overlooking the twinkling city lights. I had pulled some strings to get this reservation, hoping to impress Melissa. But as we sat down, I saw her eyes narrow slightly. "Really, David? This place again? I thought we might try somewhere new for our anniversary." I felt my heart sink. "I thought you loved it here. It's where we had our first date, remember?" She rolled her eyes. "That was years ago. People are supposed to evolve, you know." Before I could respond, our friends arrived. Mike and Anna, John and Lisa, and Peter and Rachel. All couples we'd known since before we were married. As they sat down, exchanging hugs and greetings, I hoped the night would improve. For a while it seemed like it might. The wine flowed, the conversation was lively, and even Melissa seemed to be in a better mood. But as the main course arrived, things took a turn. "So David," John said, raising his glass. "I heard a rumor that you might be up for a big promotion. Senior manager, right? That's fantastic." I felt a small surge of pride. I'd been working hard for this promotion, putting in long hours and taking on extra projects. "Well, nothing's certain yet, but—" "Senior manager," Melissa cut in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh please, David can barely manage to do the laundry without shrinking my clothes. I can't imagine him managing actual people." The table fell silent. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as everyone avoided eye contact. Mike coughed awkwardly, while Anna suddenly became very interested in her napkin. "Melissa," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's not fair. You know how hard I've been working for this promotion." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I'm just joking around. Everyone knows you're not cut out for management. You're much better off staying right where you are. It's safer that way, isn't it, honey?" I felt something inside me crack. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt bubbled to the surface. "No, Melissa, it's not safer. What's not safe is staying in a marriage with someone who constantly belittles and undermines me." The shock on her face would have been comical if the situation weren't so painful. Our friends sat frozen wide-eyed, forks suspended midway to their mouths. "David," Melissa hissed, leaning in close. "You're making a scene. Stop it." But I couldn't stop. The dam had broken. "No, I won't stop. For years I've let you tear me down, make me feel small. I've changed everything about myself trying to please you, and it's never enough. Well, I'm done." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, all eyes on our table. "I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done letting you make me feel inadequate, and I'm done with this marriage." Melissa's face had gone white. For once she was speechless. I turned to our friends who were staring at me with a mixture of shock and what looked like respect. "I'm sorry to ruin the evening, everyone. Enjoy your meal. It's on me." And with that I walked out, leaving Melissa and our stunned friends behind. As I pushed through the restaurant doors, I heard Melissa's voice, shrill and angry, calling after me. But I didn't look back. The cool night air hit me like a slap to the face. I took a deep breath, feeling lightheaded. Had I really just done that? After years of swallowing my feelings, of trying to be what Melissa wanted me to be, I finally stood up for myself. As I held the cab, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from our friends, a string of missed calls from Melissa. I turned it off. I couldn't deal with any of that right now. The cab driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Rough night, buddy. I let out a hollow laugh. You could say that. I think I just ended my marriage. He whistled low. That's heavy. Where to? I hesitated. I couldn't go home. Not to the apartment I shared with Melissa. Just drive, I said finally. I'll let you know when to stop. As we cruised through the city streets, my mind raced. What had I done? Where would I go? What would happen tomorrow when I had to face the consequences of my outburst? But underneath the panic and uncertainty, I felt something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I'd finally said what I'd been holding back for so long. Whatever happened next, I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The cab driver's voice broke into my thoughts. Hey buddy. We've been driving for an hour. You got a destination in mind yet? I looked out the window, realizing we were near my old neighborhood. Yeah, I said, making a sudden decision. Take me to the Parkview Hotel. 20 minutes later, I was checking into a small room on the hotel's top floor. It wasn't much, but it would do for tonight. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The shock on Melissa's face, the pitying looks from our friends, the feeling of finally standing up for myself. I reached for my phone, then hesitated. Did I really want to see what awaited me? With a deep breath, I turned it on. Immediately it buzzed with a barrage of notifications. Missed calls from Melissa, voicemails, text messages from friends. I ignored them all, scrolling until I found the number I was looking for. It rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello. Mom. I said, my voice cracking. I need to talk. An hour later I had poured out the whole story to my mother. The years of subtle put-downs, the constant criticism, the way Melissa had solely chipped away at my self-esteem. As I talked, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Why hadn't I told anyone this before? Oh David, my mom sighed when I finished. I had no idea things were so bad. Why didn't you say something sooner? I rubbed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. I don't know, Mom. I guess I was embarrassed. I thought I could fix things. Make Melissa happy somehow. Sweetheart, listen to me, she said, her voice firm. You are not responsible for someone else's happiness. Especially not at the cost of your own. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself tonight. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Thanks, Mom. I don't know what to do now. Now you rest, she said. Tomorrow you start rebuilding your life. On your terms this time. After we hung up, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My mom was right. This was my chance to start over, to rediscover who I was without Melissa's constant criticism shaping my every decision. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I moved out of our shared apartment and into a small studio across town. I threw myself into my work, staying late at the office and volunteering for every challenging project that came my way. I started hitting the gym, working out my frustrations on the punching bag and weightlifting until my muscles screamed. Melissa, meanwhile, seemed to be in denial about the whole situation. She left voicemails alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. I ignored them all. I needed time and space to focus on myself, to remember who I was before her constant criticism had chipped away at my confidence. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake, doubting my decision. Had I overreacted? Was I throwing away a good thing because of a few harsh words? But then I'd remember the look of contempt in Melissa's eyes, the way she made me feel small and insignificant. And I knew I'd made the right choice. The promotion I had been working towards came through, much to Melissa's apparent surprise. I overheard her at a mutual friend's party, drunkenly complaining about how I must have slipped my way to the top. I just smiled and walked away. Her words couldn't hurt me anymore. As the months passed, I found myself thriving. My new role at work was challenging but rewarding. I rediscovered old hobbies I had given up to please Melissa. Playing guitar, writing short stories, hiking on weekends. I made new friends and reconnected with old ones who had drifted away during my marriage. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Melissa wasn't about to let me go without a fight. She started showing up at my workplace, causing scenes in the lobby. She'd call my friends and family, spinning tales about how I'd abandoned her, how I was having a midlife crisis. The worst came when she somehow got hold of my new address. I came home one day to find her sitting on my doorstep, mascara streaking down her face. "David, please," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, I'll change. I'll do better. Just come home." For a moment I wavered. Seeing her like this, vulnerable and pleading, brought back memories of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But then I remembered the years of subtle put-downs, the constant criticism, the way she made me doubt myself at every turn. "I'm sorry, Melissa," I said, my voice firm but kind. "But I am home. This is my life now and I'm happy. I hope someday you can be happy too, but it won't be with me." She flew into a rage then, screaming and pounding on my chest. I had to call the police to have her removed. As they led her away, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. It was truly over. 4 months after our dinner at the restaurant, I ran into Melissa again at a work conference. I was giving a presentation on a new project my team was developing. As I looked around the audience, I saw that she was sitting in the back row. Her eyes widened in disbelief. After the presentation, she approached me, looking uncomfortable. "Die. I had no idea you were capable of all this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the conference room. I smiled, feeling a mix of satisfaction and pity. "There's a lot you didn't know about me, Melissa. Maybe if you had spent more time listening and less time criticizing, you would have." She flinched at my words, then straightened up, her old haughty expression sliding back into place. "Well, I supposed even a broken clock is right twice a day. Don't let it go to your head." I laughed, genuinely amused by her attempt to regain the upper hand. "Goodbye, Melissa. I wish you the best." As I walked away, I could feel her eyes boring into my back. But for the first time, a gaze held no power over me. I felt light, almost giddy. This encounter had proven something to me. I truly had moved on. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Melissa fought tooth and nail, trying to paint me as a villain. She claimed I had abandoned her, that I was going through a midlife crisis. A lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit, tried to argue that she deserved alimony due to the sacrifices she had made for our marriage. I sat through the hearings, feeling a mix of anger and pity. How have I not seen this side of her before? How have I let myself be manipulated for so long? My own lawyer, a kind but fierce woman named Janet, was a godsend. She helped me document the emotional abuse I had suffered, gathering statements from friends, and even some of Melissa's former colleagues who had witnessed her behavior. The turning point came when Janet called Melissa to the stand. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice calm but steely. "Can you please tell the court about your career during your marriage to Mr. Thompson?" Melissa straightened in her seat, a smug smile on her face. "Of course, I worked tirelessly as a corporate lawyer, often putting in 60-hour weeks to build my career." Janet nodded. "And during this time, did you ever take a break from your career to support Mr. Thompson's?" Melissa's smile faltered. "Well, no, but..." "In fact," Janet continued, "isn't it true that Mr. Thompson often took on additional household responsibilities to support your career ambitions?" The color drained from Melissa's face. She glanced at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. "Yes," she admitted reluctantly. Janet pressed on, presenting evidence of Melissa's substantial income, her frequent work trips and testimony from our friends about her treatment of me. By the end of the day, it was clear which way the judge was leaning. In the end, not only was Melissa's alimony claim denied, but she was ordered to pay me a settlement for emotional distress. As the judge read out his decision, I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. Finally, the truth had come out. But as I watched Melissa slump in her seat, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Despite everything she had put me through, I didn't want to see her destroyed. Outside the courthouse, as Melissa brushed past me without a word, I called out to her. "Melissa, wait." She turned, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. "What? Come to vote?" I shook my head. "No. I just wanted to say I hope you find happiness, Melissa. Real happiness, not the kind that comes from tearing others down." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of the woman I had once loved. Then it was gone, replaced by a sneer. "Save your pity, David. I don't need it. And with that, she was gone. I stood there for a long moment, watching her walk away. It felt like the end of a chapter, but also the beginning of something new. I was free, truly free for the first time in years. A settlement money burned a hole in my pocket. I didn't want it. It felt tainted somehow. After much thought, I decided to donate it all to a charity supporting victims of domestic abuse, both men and women. When Melissa found out she was livid, she left me a scathing voicemail, accusing me of trying to paint her as an abuser. "You know what, Melissa?" I said when I called her back. "I don't care what you think anymore. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Maybe someday you'll understand that." I hung up before she could respond, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the last time we ever spoke. Life went on. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I was capable of success on my own terms. The promotion I had been working towards when Melissa and I split became just the first step in a rapid climb up the corporate ladder. My colleagues noticed the change in me. Gone was the hesitant, self-doubting David, who second-guessed every decision. In his place was a man who spoke with confidence, who wasn't afraid to take risks and stand up for his ideas. David, my boss, said to me one day after I had successfully pitched a major project to the board, "I don't know what's gotten into you these past few months, but whatever it is, keep it up. You're doing fantastic work." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Thanks, sir. I guess you could say I've had a wake-up call. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself." As my professional life flourished, I also started to rebuild my personal life. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during my marriage, started playing in a local amateur guitar group, and even took up hiking again on weekends. It was on one of these hikes that I ran into Mike and Anna, the couple who had been at that fateful dinner where I had finally stood up to Melissa. They looked uncomfortable at first, but I greeted them warmly. "David, man, it's good to see you," Mike said, giving me a hearty handshake. "You look great. Have you been?" We chatted for a while, catching up on each other's lives. As we were about to part ways, Anna hesitated, then blurted out, "David, we owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow, confused. "For what?" Mike sighed, running a hand through his hair. "For not saying anything when Melissa would put you down. We saw what was happening, but we didn't want to get involved. We should have said something, should have stood up for you." I was touched by their honesty. "Thank you. That means a lot. But you don't need to apologize. Melissa was very good at what she did. I didn't even realize how bad things were until I got out." Anna nodded, her eyes shining with tears. We've stopped spending time with her. After you left that night at the restaurant, we started noticing how she treated other people too. It wasn't just you." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish Melissa ill. I just hoped she would eventually recognize her behavior and get help. We parted ways with promises to stay in touch. And this time we meant it. Over the next few months, I slowly reconnected with other friends from my married life. Many had similar stories. They had seen the signs, but hadn't known how to intervene. It was a bittersweet realization. On one hand, it hurt to know that so many people had witnessed my humiliation and said nothing. But on the other hand, it was a powerful reminder of how far I'd come. The man I was now wouldn't have tolerated that treatment for a day, let alone years. As my career continued to flourish, I found myself being asked to speak at industry events and conferences. At first, the idea terrified me. Melissa's voice echoed in my head, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I'd make a fool of myself. But I pushed through the fear, determined not to let her ghost control me any longer. To my surprise, I discovered I had a talent for public speaking. My talks on innovation and leadership were well received, and I soon found myself in demand as a speaker. It was at one of these events that I met Elena. Elena was different from anyone I'd ever known. She was kind, supportive, but also fiercely independent. She challenged me in ways that made me grow, not in ways that made me doubt myself. For the first time since my divorce, I felt myself opening up to the possibility of love again. Our relationship progressed slowly, both of us carrying baggage from past hurts. But with each passing day I found myself falling deeper. Elena didn't try to change me or mold me into someone else. She loved me for who I was, quirks and all. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, Elena turned to me with a serious expression. "David," she said. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. "Of course, anything." She took a deep breath. "I've noticed that sometimes when I compliment you or when things are going really well, you get this scared look in your eyes like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is that because of your ex-wife?" I felt my heart rate quicken. I hadn't realized my scars were still so visible. Yeah, I guess it is," I admitted. "Melissa, she had a way of building me up just to tear me down. I guess I'm still getting used to genuine kindness." Elena reached out and took my hand. "David, I want you to know something. I'm not Melissa. I'm not going to hurt you like she did. When I say I love you, I mean it. All of you, the good, the bad, the parts who are still healing. You don't have to be perfect with me. You just have to be you." Tears welled up in my eyes. I pulled Elena close, burying my face in her hair. "Thank you," I whispered. "I love you too so much." That conversation was a turning point for us. I felt myself truly letting go of the last of my fears, fully embracing the love and support Elena offered. And as I did, I found myself growing even more, becoming more confident, more self-assured. It was on a hike in the mountains, standing at the summit, overlooking a breathtaking valley, that I realized I was ready to take the next step. I turned to Elena, my heart pounding. "Elena," I said, taking her hands in mine, "you've shown me what real love looks like. You've helped me become the best version of myself. Will you marry me?" Her eyes widened in surprise, then filled with tears of joy. "Yes, David, 1,000 times yes." As we embraced, the sun breaking through the clouds and bathing us in golden light, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was what love was supposed to feel like. This was what I deserved. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, just close friends and family. As I stood at the altar, watching Elena walk towards me, I couldn't help but think back to my first wedding. The contrast was stark. Where before I had felt nervous, unsure, now I felt nothing but certainty and joy. After the ceremony, as we danced under the stars, Elena leaned in close. "I'm so proud of you, David," she whispered. "Look how far you've come." I pulled her closer, overwhelmed with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. She shook her head, smiling. "No, this was all you. I just helped you see what was already there." As the night wore on and our guests began to leave, I found myself in a quiet moment with my mom. She hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. "Oh, David," she said. "If only your father could see you now, he'd be so proud." I felt a lump in my throat. My dad had passed away just a year before I met Melissa. I often wondered what he would have thought of her if he would have seen through her facade when I couldn't. "I hope so, Mom," I said softly. She pulled back, cupping my face in her hands. "I know so. You've become the man he always knew you could be. Strong, kind, true to yourself. That's all he ever wanted for you."